Okay, thanks very much. Kirsty Wilson from the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh and Dr. David Kelly from Heriot-Watt University. Could you outline to us what a rain garden is, please?
So who wants to start?
Shall I go?
Yeah, you go.
So a rain garden is a sustainable solution to managing stormwater. Particularly, it's a nature-based solution. So the rain garden is designed to act as a big sponge. So any rainwater runoff from a big storm can be directed towards the rain garden, and it intercepts and holds that rain in place. The key features of the rain garden is its shape. It's created as a basin within the ground. It has amended soil to be more infiltrating, and to amend that soil, usually by mixing in some sand and gravel and compost. And the other key component is the planting. So a rain garden is very much a garden with a mix of native and non-native plants that can deal with both drought and boggy wet conditions.
And how does that transpose? You've had a very successful experiment, if you like, at the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. Can you move that to scale to help the agri sector?
We think you can.
It would just need upscaled almost.
It would need upscaled. The reason why we installed the rain garden at the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh was they had a localised flooding problem, and it was affecting an area that was a well manicured lawn. So there was soil, there was grass, some trees in that area as well. But there was a lot of runoff in that area that was collected, and there'd be localised flooding. The rain garden, as we put it in place, just intercepted all of that runoff and has completely removed the flooding that would usually occur there.
So there's no flooding at all now.
Yeah.
It doesn't pool with water, though. Even though we catered for that, it has sort of a gravel mulch on it. There are wider areas that are just planted up with more compost and soil, but it is completely covered in plants, and it is absorbing that extra water. It's, obviously in the agricultural sector, we've lost 97% of our wildflower meadows in our countryside areas. So if we could actually have native planting established with these rain gardens in a wider countryside setting, could actually really benefit wildlife and biodiversity going forward, which, a bit like buffer strips or field margins, if you can add in these native areas, it is really good for wildlife.
And rain gardens are particularly great for these kind of situations because they're, in terms of size and shape, they're completely flexible. So if it's a small area, a small narrow area, it can be fitted in. If it's a larger wide space, it can be adapted to that. So they're extremely adaptable, extremely flexible, and really we're just looking for those components of higher infiltrating soil, and a well thought through planting system that adds that biodiversity to those areas. So you're helping with local wildlife and insects and bugs and birds and all of those benefits, pollinators. Also, the rain gardens have an aesthetic contribution as well. So where a space might be lacking in character, by installing a rain garden, not only is it functioning as a adapted way to deal with stormwater, it's also providing those splashes of colour to a space. So the benefits are really strong.
You could also try and harness that water as well. Maybe you upscale it to a scale where it almost comes into a pond, and maybe you could use that in agriculture to water your crops after that. There's also infiltration steps where you put the water through various stages and reeds, and it filters it and cleans it out into a pond. Many of these situations have happened as well. But yeah, it's now about, we're getting such intense rainfall and then such drought. It's trying to capture that water when it comes into such a heavy capacity, and you might be able to hold that somewhere in a rain garden and then use that later to water crops.
What's the process of, you have an area prone to flooding, what's the process of establishing a rain garden? You mentioned using a topographical survey initially.
Yeah, in our case we
Like
did
hydrology,
use
yep.
we did use a survey of the topography, and we used open source GIS called QGIS, which can be used to look at topography of any part of the UK. It doesn't need to be as specialist or as scientific as that. Looking at the area that you want to take the runoff from, and looking at the space that you have for the rain garden, you can just assess how much rainfall you're expecting to have. And even just going to the Met Office site, looking at what the average rainfall is, and then you can calculate the volume of rain that you would expect to see. Any size of rain garden would be beneficial. So although we designed our rain garden to cope with a particular size of storm, no matter what the size of space that you have, by just adding in the rain garden with that extra capacity to hold and intercept the rainfall will be an improvement from what's there before.
Can you tell me the characteristics of a rain garden in terms of how it's constructed?
So yeah, the characteristics of a rain garden, fundamentally, first of all, it's a basin dug into the ground. You fill that basin with amended soil, and the amended soil is part existing soil mixed with constituents that would enhance the infiltration capacity. So sand, some fine gravel, and some compost. We designed the rain garden so that there's a bit of a dip in the middle, so to allow for any ponding if that were to happen. And around the outer part, the part that's on the opposite side to where any runoff will come in from, we also install a small berm which just holds the water in place and prevents any running out of the rain garden. In addition, then the other key component is the planting.
Yeah, and the planting could be anything from trees, shrubs, herbaceous perennials, or a grassland, different types of grasses or wildflowers. And obviously they all have different, if you have more trees and shrubs, they can obviously take up a lot more moisture. But then the benefit of the herbaceous perennials or the grasses is that's better for wildlife too, and things can live in there. And then obviously the wildflowers are good for pollinators too. And also to have a diversity of planting is better for wildlife too. So if you can incorporate all of them into it, then it will be a really biodiverse rain garden going forward for the future.
Okay. And you've just, in terms of biodiversity, you've just written a book on this?
Yeah, so I've just written a book on planting with nature, a sustainable guide to gardening, which is all about gardening with nature and how we can make a difference in our own gardens and be a bit more greener, helping wildlife. And I talk about how to make a rain garden for your own garden, rain garden planters, and how to establish even a wildflower meadow.
Ideal. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think if you want to come and see the rain garden at the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh, there's lots of information. We've written a scientific paper on this rain garden as well. There's information on the Botanics website all about it as well, and it's been a great collaboration between the Botanics and Heriot-Watt University.
Ideal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.